Can you all hear me? My
Yeah.
computer is actually frozen. Like I
Oh,
can't
no.
move my mouse for some reason. So I can't click anything.
I wonder if, oh yeah, Dr. Ramos is, maybe whoever else is a co-host or host can maybe like kick you off from sharing and then we can go from there.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we do that.
But I do believe if Liz is the host, we might be.
I think I am the host.
Okay,
So
perfect. Okay.
if you want to leave, Liz, do an alt control delete. You have 3 minutes. I'm gonna pause the recording.
Mhm.
Okay. I might have to restart if this doesn't fix it.
Yep, so I just paused the recording and then we're good. Good evening, everyone. So we're just waiting for a few folks while we get started. Translation is on, and I am Dr. Amy Ramos. Welcome to tonight's meeting. We will get started shortly. Please get comfortable, get your desired beverage to stay together for the next 2 hours, and we will start shortly.
Muy buenas noches a todos. Ya está encendida la interpretación para quien guste unirse a la interpretación. Vamos a comenzar en unos cuantos minutos. Entre medio, si gustan ir a agarrar su bebida favorita o ponerse cómodos, en un momento comenzamos.
Sí, gracias.
Okay, I am back. Thank you everyone for waiting as I try to resolve my technical issues. Let's see. I had to just restart my computer, so I gotta get a couple windows open. Mm. Am I freezing at all? Because it's getting okay. It's acting up. You're all kind of frozen.
You're
Not
lagging
bad.
just like a touch. Your video is a little bit off sync with your mouth moving.
Weird. Hopefully that resolves itself. Let's see. Okay, pulling up our slides again. Here we go. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody to our August Community Steering Committee for the South Fresno community. This is our 48th meeting. My name is Liz Lev, and I'm one of the facilitators from Harder & Company, and I'm joined here by my colleague, Dr. Amy Ramos. Our colleague Jem, you may notice, is missing. She is just not able to attend tonight, but she will be back with us next month. If you're having any technical issues at any point or need help with anything, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Amy or anybody on the Air District team. So before we get started, we're going to walk through our usual logistics slides. On my screen, I am showing you a slide that's likely very familiar. We see instructions for how to select your language channel for interpretation. And I believe I will now pass it off to Lingüística to walk us through those steps.
Thank you, Liz. Hola, muy buenas tardes a todos. Bienvenidos a la reunión. A través de esta reunión el día de hoy vamos a tener interpretación simultánea encendida. De hecho, ya tenemos la interpretación simultánea encendida. Así es que si usted está en una computadora regular, usted puede seleccionar el icono que aparece un mundo abajo de su pantalla. Después de que seleccione el icono que aparece un mundo, usted va a seleccionar su lenguaje de preferencia. En este caso va a ser español. Y también le invitamos a poner el audio original en silencio o Mute Original Audio para que de esta manera no escuche el eco en inglés. Después de eso, quedará lista para poder participar en su totalidad. Le invitamos a someter cualquier pregunta o comentario que usted tenga en su lenguaje de preferencia y aquí estaremos para asistir. Si usted está utilizando un celular o una tableta, sus opciones van a ser diferentes. Usted va a seleccionar los 3 puntitos que indican more o más en su pantalla. Típicamente, si está en un celular, van a estar en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla. Después de seleccionar los 3 puntitos, usted va a deslizar un poquito hacia arriba y va a seleccionar Language Interpretation o interpretación de lenguajes. Después de eso va a seleccionar español y por último tiene la opción de seleccionar el poner el audio original en silencio o Mute Original Audio y no olvide oprimir listo, finalizado o done para que de esta manera se active la función. If you are a monolingual English only speaker, we also invite you to select the interpretation icon. If you're on a computer, you will select the world-like icon at the bottom of the screen and you will click on English. And this will enable you to be able to hear our Spanish participants' participation in real time. And everything else will be just as normal. If you're on a phone or a tablet, your options are different. You will actually select the 3 little dots that say more. You're going to slide a little bit upward. And then you are going to select language interpretation and click English. And this way you will be able to also activate interpretation on your phone or tablet. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions, or is anyone having any problems with interpretation before we move on? Okay.
No.
Okay. So on this next slide, you're seeing the renaming convention, which is important for our attendance tracking and our stipend distribution process. So we on the facilitation team and members of the Air District will be working behind the scenes to help with renaming and any other technical difficulties. So again, please feel free to reach out at any point. So here we just have another reminder about the naming conventions. If you are not a member of the CSC, please write your organization name in your Zoom name. So we have an idea of who is here and who is a member of the public. So please make sure to stay on mute unless you're speaking. If you're joining by phone only, you can press *6 to mute and unmute yourself. If you have any questions or any thoughts that you would like to share, we ask that you raise your Zoom hand. If you're on the phone and want to participate and speak, you can raise your hand using *9. And another reminder that residents who are in the stipend program should stay on for at least 75% of this meeting, which is 90 minutes out of our 2 hours together. So this slide here is a review of our group agreements. So everyone here has agreed to help achieve the meeting goals by focusing on solutions, opportunities, and productive dialogue. We want to make sure that we're mindful of creating space for everyone here to participate. We also ask for everyone to be kind and respectful, knowing that it is okay to disagree as long as you do so with respect and empathy. In these meetings, we also agreed to stay on point and on time. So please try to keep your comments brief so that everyone can have a chance to participate. We do recognize the urgency and importance of these conversations and definitely don't want to cut them short. We also want to be respectful of everyone's time here. So our team will be trying to keep track of time as best we can and just point out those moments when we might be running a little late. And in those cases, what we'll do is check in with you all about whether you would like to continue the conversation tonight, maybe go over time, or whether it would possibly be more effective to continue the conversation at another meeting. Next, we agreed to attack the problem and not the person. And then finally, we agreed to seek common ground. Building consensus and finding shared values will help us achieve the best results. So here you see the agenda for this evening. We'll start as usual by reviewing the action item tracker. Then at 5:40 or 5:45, we will review the SERP incentives measures update. At 6:20, we will talk about wildfire resources and outreach. 6:55, we'll have standing updates. 7:20, we'll start to wrap up, talk about next steps and agenda setting, and then we will move on to public comment. And I'd just like to continue the practice that Eric and Jem started for us several months ago and take a moment again to acknowledge the traditional territories that California now occupies. Land acknowledgements are important as they serve to develop awareness of colonialism in the past and in the present, as we know that colonialism still has a major impact on many of us today. We will continue to incorporate these acknowledgements moving forward to recognize ancestral territories and that the First Nations are the traditional and rightful stewards of the land that we occupy. And so I am currently in Central Oregon, which is on the traditional territory of the Northern Paiute, Wasco, and Warm Springs tribes. My colleague Amy, who is in San Diego, is on unceded territory of the Kumeyaay. And for everyone residing in Fresno, you are on the traditional homeland of the Yokuts, who were the only residents of that area until the mid-1800s when the American settlers came. We do recognize that simple land acknowledgements are not enough, and we all have to take real action towards addressing these past injustices. And so with that, we honor the land itself, and we honor those who have been and those who remain stewards of this land for generations to come. So thank you everyone for holding that space. So I'll transition to some brief opening remarks from the Air District and also our co-host, Kimberly. Jess, would you like to start us off?
I will, and thank you so much, Liz. We're excited to have you facilitate tonight's meeting, and I just want to acknowledge and thank so much Kimberly McCoy, who stepped up when we didn't have a co-host and volunteered to co-host, and we just appreciate and look forward to her leadership. She's co-hosted several times, so I know she'll do a great job and kind of guide our discussion tonight. I will say tonight's a little bit different. We have sort of updates, of course, on SERP implementation, but later in the agenda, Janie Holt is going to give a presentation that we think is very timely, and we appreciate the agenda setting folks helping us design this agenda and really talk and hone in particularly about protecting people during wildfires, so I look forward to that. And then just something else I'll acknowledge, because sometimes we run late in the meeting, which is okay, but sometimes folks drop off. I just want to let you all know that it struck us that tonight is the 48th meeting, meaning in 2 months, it will be our 50th meeting. So I encourage you, and we will send an email out as well, but please help by attending our agenda setting meeting next week. Because I think we should talk a little bit about maybe making that 50th meeting something a little bit special, something where we reflect. Maybe it's a lot of you all presenting and discussing some of the work, or reflecting a little bit back on the work that we've done over 50 meetings, which is incredible. So that's my plug in case you don't hear that at the end of the meeting and you have to drop off early. With that, I'm happy to pass it to Kimberly, our co-host for tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all for being present here tonight for this meeting. We have a jam-packed agenda, a lot of information, a lot of updates to be given. And I am very honored to be your co-host again for maybe the 4th or 5th time. I don't know, I lost track of it. But thank you again for allowing me to co-host this meeting. It's going to be a rich discussion and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you both. It's definitely an exciting milestone to reach 50 meetings, so I hope we do get to celebrate in some way together. So I'll move us on to our next agenda item, which is the action item tracker follow-up. So I believe Stephanie will lead us through that.
Thanks so much, Liz, and just finding my unmute button here. And again, this is just, we've done it a lot, but this again is just a routine check-in of some of the action items that we've had from previous meetings. During the last meeting, we did have a handful, so I'm gonna kind of zoom through them, but I'll start here at our main page, and you can find these action items at the top corner. And again, this action item tracker is broken up by items that are still in progress and ones that have been completed, and the highlighted ones indicate ones that have changed since the last meeting. And so the first item, add agenda item to land use subcommittee meeting to discuss upcoming city planning efforts that will impact the CSC. And so we are working with the city of Fresno to schedule out the next land use subcommittee. Additionally, there was a request from the city of Fresno to follow up on regulations for idling vehicles. And so we did follow up with the city of Fresno, and they have been quite busy, but once they have a response for us, we'll update the action item tracker to follow up on this specifically for government employee vehicles. Similar to the first item, Air District will help ensure CSC members are part of the process for developing an early alert system regarding city planning projects before they're approved and implemented. Very similarly to the first item, the Air District is working with the city of Fresno to schedule the next land use subcommittee. And this will definitely be on the agenda, is to work with the CSC on the development of this early alert system. Develop an outreach strategy for schools to be notified about the extension of the RFP. And so we are working on outreach materials to share out with schools, and we'll begin conducting outreach to schools towards the end of August and beginning of September to kind of to not conflict with that beginning of school and kind of all the madness that's happening with that. Air District will email CSC to solicit interest in forming a new residential air filtration subcommittee. And so we will, following this meeting, send out a doodle to the CSC to plan our first kickoff for this subcommittee. And I will just kind of say these next 4 or 5 items did come out of the air monitoring presentation, and just a general update we have to share kind of following up on that presentation is that we will plan to have kind of our quarterly air monitoring updates. And something that we discussed in our last air monitoring and outreach subcommittee was to work with any folks that are interested to send out the presentation for these quarterly air monitoring updates to these interested folks to get some feedback before we share out with the entire CSC. And I'll slow down. I know I have a habit of talking quickly. The Air District will bring DPR into the conversation with the CSC regarding air quality monitoring. And so the Air District did reach out to DPR, and they are committed to coming to an upcoming meeting depending on interest that's expressed. So we definitely want to encourage you to come to the agenda setting if this is something that if you'd like to see at an upcoming agenda. There was also a suggestion to conduct air quality monitoring off Parkway and Olive. And currently the air monitoring van is undergoing repairs, but we can add Parkway and Olive to the list of sites for future monitoring with the van. And these next 2 items, again, we'll plan to bring back for our next quarterly air monitoring update, which will include comparisons of annual air quality monitoring data. And additionally, kind of if there's ways to distinguish between biomass incinerators and residential wood burning in the air quality data. And there was an item regarding carbon OEHA, providing more detailed information about different threshold levels for adults compared to children. And so the district will continue to work with carbon OEHA to report back information on this. And if the CSC is interested, we can look to add a more in-depth agenda item at the next air monitoring presentation. With that, I'll go ahead and move us down to the completed items. There was a request to hear about the other applicant that had applied to the truck reroute study. So we did include the name of that other applicant that did apply. There's also a request to extend the open RFP phase for the trees, so vegetative barriers and urban greening proposals to allow for schools to submit an application. And kind of per that request, we did extend the solicitation for both of those measures to September 30th.
Stephanie, sorry, can you go back to the other applicant so we can really get a chance to see it? It was really, really fast.
Oop, yes, I'll read it out
Right
to you.
here.
The other applicant for the truck reroute RFP was CPCS and VRPA Technologies, Inc.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then during our last meeting, a CSC member did express having some trouble with the Valley Air app, our phone app. And so our staff did follow up, and it seems like this member is no longer having issues with the app, and it's working fine. And then CSC members are invited to follow up with Air District to ask any questions that were not answered at tonight's meeting. And so we always, at any time, invite CSC members to follow up with any questions at ab617@valleyair.org. And finally, we did talk about the Clean Air Center pilot program, and CSC members, so including kind of private and public entities, are definitely encouraged to apply to the Clean Air Center pilot. The link is here that you can visit, and the 3rd solicitation for this will be open really shortly here. And with that, I would like to invite anyone to ask any questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen too.
I'll just add some context. I think you characterized it really well, Stephanie, but just to confirm with others, we did have an air monitoring outreach subcommittee meeting. And as Stephanie mentioned, we hope to not only through that group, but anyone that's interested. So maybe now's a good time to place your name in the chat if you're interested in being one of the folks that helps us maybe even quarterly, but certainly for our next update on air monitoring, review the presentation and provide feedback ahead of time. So like I said, we'll definitely schedule some of that review during the next air monitoring and outreach subcommittee, or at least the one that's before our next quarterly update. But we also want to have folks that are interested and maybe can't make those meetings be kind of on our short list of folks to email out. So please put your name in the chat. And with that, thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. So I think we can move on to our next agenda item. I'm not seeing any more questions. So some of you may be aware that there's been a lot of movement around some of these incentive measures, especially with funding for some school-related measures. So I'm going to pass it off to the Air District team to walk you through a few of these updates. And of course, as they are providing updates, please feel free to raise your hand if you have a question or put your question in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. So thank you all. So I will, before I even start my presentation, just sort of walk us through a sort of summary of where we've come and where we've been headed and sort of the direction you've given us as an Air District in terms of moving forward with the two directly school-related measures. And that is funding for school buses and funding for air filtration for schools within the boundary. So as you all know, we've come to you several times with all of the different sort of incentives measures and where they're at in the process. And these two measures in particular have been a little bit difficult to move forward for, I think, a variety of reasons. I think the first is that, of course, as we know, when the world sort of stopped in 2020, schools were hit rather hard. And that not only sort of put a little bit of a pause on their interactions in doing some of the upgrades, especially to their transportation system, but also a variety of schools, and we're finding this actually in all of the 617 communities, had sort of an inundation of funding to do some air filtration upgrades. So it was sort of felt like it was maybe even in conflict with what we were providing. So you all asked us, and we really appreciate the push and the support from you all, to schedule a meeting, particularly with Fresno Unified, since they have the bulk, they have more than half, they have about 70% of the schools within the boundary are in the Fresno Unified School District, particularly to meet with the board trustees and of course the staff in charge of implementing the decisions and interested CSC members to really understand directly from them, so you can all hear it at the same time the district hears it, what their interest in commitment is to moving forward with these measures. So we had those meetings. We had actually a pretty good turnout, and I appreciate all of you that were able to attend. We did record those meetings, so if you are interested, we can point you to those recordings or even just follow up with you. But today we felt like it made sense to summarize a little bit, not only because not everyone was at the meeting, but because there has been some work since. So I'm going to share my screen, and actually what I'm sharing, a lot of the information that is here was actually shared with the board members themselves. This is definitely a shortened version. It definitely, of course, provided some background on all of the work you've all been doing. But primarily, I wanted to focus on those two measures. And so really briefly, this is a reminder of what the school air filtration program is. We walked the school district folks through this and sort of talked about the program guidelines and program application. I think you are all aware that we have we have $1.5 million available for area public schools. And we've talked a lot with you all about how it can essentially be integrated into their current HVAC or their like air conditioning system, or they can provide one of these sort of like standalone units. It's been open for funding and we have all the installation costs covered. So we had several questions and a lot of follow-up that we had for the school. So this is sort of where we were at right when we attended that July 20th meeting, which was based on past discussions. The school district had let us know that they were in the process of evaluating the schools, but we felt, and you all gave us direction, that we wanted to know, just so we can make a decision as a CSC, whether or not we needed to move funding because we're coming up close on funding deadlines, whether or not they had completed this evaluation, where they were at with understanding what schools in the boundary needed filtration. And so we sort of started with this as the discussion point. And then we had really two questions for the Fresno Unified staff and for the trustees. The two questions were point blank, just wondering, right, what the air filtration upgrades were. I think all of you have been asking, and we certainly wanted to know what upgrades, if any, have they undergone, so we can understand if the funding is still needed. So they did let us know that there were some standalone filtration units, but certainly not at all schools. They had not completed their evaluation. And so we've met with them several times since this meeting. And within the next 2 weeks, we are expecting to get a complete list of what those schools look like. And so the second question, and a question that you all asked as well, was, well, is there still a need? Is there still an interest? So during that meeting and immediately following, we literally had a meeting the next day, 2 actually separate meetings the next day. Not only did they reiterate their interest, but they were talking more specifically about purchasing those standalone units, which in their case would allow them to deploy the air filtration a little bit faster than if they had to do full upgrades to their system. They've certainly learned a lot, it sounded like, from some of the work that they've been doing. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, they have changed some of their staff members. And so that was some of their explanation as to the evaluation that originally had happened and sort of where they're at now. Our commitment to you is to update you regardless in the next 2 weeks as to the exact status. So you are all up to date the same time we are as to whether or not they're still moving forward or what the next steps are as identified by the district, both the air district and the school district. So I'm going to stop there because I do have a separate update about school buses, but don't want to conflate the 2 issues, and wanted to know if folks had questions as to the next step, or if folks that were there had anything that I missed in terms of what the air filtration discussion was. Dr. Curry, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you so much for the update. How does their response compare with my earlier understanding of what other school districts had been able to do and what they were able to achieve in terms of improving air quality? So I'm concerned about if the standalone is just sort of the path of least resistance. I don't know how effective it is, and it doesn't sound like there's a sense of urgency, and it feels that we have been asking for them to be more concerned about our kids' health than what you're actually hearing. And so are these standalones effective? Where's the evidence of that? And they still sound like, yeah, we're interested in having some money, but I don't know that it meets the kind of urgency that we wanted to see, that I wanted to see. So
I'll first answer kind of your first technical question, in that we will make sure that in that evaluation and even in our discussions that we've had so far with them, we've already given them feedback on what is and isn't acceptable or effective types of standalone units, to your point. And really to the structure, I shared here really high level guidelines, but there are more detailed guidelines through CARB actually about types of units and the size of the unit that you need. There's some requirements about the sound, like decibels, so that it doesn't interrupt learning. So there are technical requirements there, Dr. Curry, that we have been very specific. And in our, like I said, in our recent interactions, even provided some direct feedback as to which units are or aren't acceptable. I think to your other point, maybe less of a technical response, but I think are also feeling that same way as, I will say that this kind of feels a little bit like where we were, right? The last time we met with some trustees and some staff. We're very hopeful that I would say that the response we've had in the past 2 weeks on back and forth and looking at different units is much more responsive than the last time we kind of went through this comprehensive look, which is why we really put this really structured 2-week deadline, so that it's not just month to month that we update you all on. I will say, and this is something we've told you all in the past, certainly each time we have this discussion, is that the CSC, as we get these updates and we feel like maybe these timelines and deadlines continue to slip, we can still make a recommendation should we want to amend our approach somehow, whether that's shifting the funds to do something else that still protects the students in a different way, but maybe isn't through the schools, or some other creative approach. But I do hear you. And one thing we heard really loud and clear from the CSC members that were at the meeting was that we as a CSC are really committed to providing these funds to the school district. I know that Naimeen mentioned that several times and Lisa mentioned that several times, that we're trying really hard, and the CSC is trying hard to fund the district to provide, to your point, the protections. I hope I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of just went off there a little bit.
Well, I think you did. And I'm looking at the second question, and it still seems like, yes, there is a need. I guess the question is the level of willingness, and or are there some challenges that we are not aware of, that it just seems like like you said, we've been having the same conversation, and it seems unusual that there would be such reluctance to go ahead and invest in something. And
I think, and I'll share some challenges that they expressed very specifically about school buses. We did not hear any specific challenges about air filtration. I think, to your point, the level of willingness does feel a little bit different, like I mentioned this time, because they're being more responsive. We're giving direct feedback on that assessment. But I do hear you, and I do think one of the questions that I still think is a little unclear to us is exactly what they have done with, I think, some of that funding, because that's sort of the big question you've all asked as well, is what has been done and where has it been done. So I think that's another piece that we're wanting and need to get, like I said, in the next couple of weeks. Liz, are there any, it's hard for me to see any chat comments. I don't know if there's questions for me in the chat as well.
I'm not seeing any questions.
Awesome. Well, like I said, regardless, we plan to send out an update to you all in the next couple of weeks. And so we can then use that as a starting point if we need to make a decision or have a different type of discussion at our next CSC meeting. So I'm going to move on to buses, which is definitely, I would say, further along by a lot, actually. So, but we do have some questions for you. So just as a reminder, we have a lot of money for buses. It is for up to 16 buses, but I do have a little caveat to that based on some discussions we've had with you all and the discussion we had with the school district. So keep that in mind as I move forward. Just as a reminder, it does place, it can pay for up to 100% of the cost of the bus, and that's essentially based on how much it's reducing emissions. And it does replace existing school buses with electric buses. It has been open for funding, and again, as you all know, we've worked really hard with the school district to try to identify which buses they are removing and try to identify what barriers are preventing them from investing in this. I think those that were there, please add to some of this, but essentially the first question we asked, and the facilities and transportation folks that were there were very, very adamant that Fresno Unified is still very interested in replacing buses. So it's definitely, I would say, a much stronger commitment in terms of buses. And then we directly asked, well, what are the barriers? Sort of why have we not moved forward? So there were two sort of concerns, and we think we can address them. One of them you have all already given us support for during our June meeting. And the first concern was infrastructure. They want to make sure that they can pay and have installed charging infrastructure so that they don't run into some of the issues that they've heard from kind of other colleagues in other school districts about charging infrastructure not being plentiful enough or not being located in the correct spaces. So we have already indicated that we can help figure out what they need and how much that would cost. And then you all, and confirming, and we can continue to confirm this with you all, but during the June CSC meeting, there was a motion and folks voted to, if needed, and if it was identified as a barrier, which it was, to support charging infrastructure for the buses through the SERP. And so that's something that we hope to do, and we will continue to work with Fresno Unified to identify fully what that cost will look like. The second piece is a little bit not complicated, but just a little bit different than the CERP. And that is Fresno Unified has already upgraded over the past, decade or more, several of their old diesel buses to natural gas buses. Obviously, we all know that those aren't quite zero emission, right? They're not electric. And some of them are actually old natural gas buses, meaning they're pretty dirty still. They're not as dirty as diesel, but they're certainly older natural gas buses. The CERP actually identifies us replacing diesel buses and getting them to as clean as possible, so electric. But we can, through the existing type of program, replace natural gas buses if that's something that you all are interested in. The reasons that were given during the meeting, and then again with some very specific follow-ups with the school district, were that they have most of the buses that operate within the area are those natural gas buses, and those are the buses that they would want to replace to get to the cleanest technologies. So this is really a question for you all. And maybe we can sort of use this as, if there are no objections, we can certainly work and move forward with CARB and the school district to kind of give them the go-ahead, or at least let them explore exchanging those. But my question for you all is there any objection to us working with Fresno Unified to change out their older natural gas buses with electric buses? Or any questions about what that means? I do have our incentives folks that might know a little bit more about that if you have specifics. And I will just share, those of you that are at that were at our meeting with us, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there were several folks at the meeting. We did have this discussion during the meeting, and several CSC members during the meeting were very supportive of doing what we needed to do to be flexible in the CERP to make sure that we can transition to zero emission technologies. So I don't see any objections, and I don't know if there's any questions or comments in particular about this. But I will, as I said, go on to say that in particular, we've again met several times with the transportation team. I think seems reinvigorated now that there's support for infrastructure and that there's a potential for this flexibility. I think it opens up their door a little bit more for them to feel like they can replace these buses.
Just want to take a moment to see if there are any questions. I feel like that was definitely a lot of information shared, and at least with me, I'm a slow processor, so I want to give others time.
And while folks are digesting that, I will say, and I didn't say it here, just to confirm and reiterate, we will again, maybe at the same time, we're already going to plan to update you on school filtration. We can update you at that time as well on the progress with school buses. I will say the one thing I've heard from you all, and something that we've really instilled in this whole process, is the time at this point it feels like it's far away, but really we have about 2.5 years left of implementation. And so it really is, time is of the essence. I do see Lilia's hand.
Buenas tardes a todos. Sí, esa es la pregunta que tenía Jessica referente al dinero. Dijiste, tenemos mucho dinero para los buses. ¿Cómo vamos a trabajar con ese dinero para los buses escolares? Porque me imagino que es para los buses escolares. ¿Y dónde, qué buses serían y qué distritos serían? Porque sabemos que trabajamos con otros condados. Entonces, quiero saber exactamente a dónde se va a dirigir ese fondo o ese dinero de sus bases, para dónde se van a ir. Por favor.
Great question. So Lilia, we are right now the main target, although we've already replaced buses at Malaga Elementary, so that's Fowler Unified School District. And we have been in discussions with the other school districts in the boundary as well. But primarily, since the majority of the schools in the boundary are Fresno Unified, we are primarily starting, or I should say continuing, this more aggressive conversation in terms of continually contacting Fresno Unified because of the number of schools that are in it. That is a great question as to the number. So as I mentioned earlier, and that's a good reminder, the target in the SERP, it essentially had $6.4 million, and that was for 16 buses. We want to use some of that for infrastructure. And so maybe that's an action item we can write down, is that we can come back at the next meeting and be more specific about the funding for infrastructure and then how many buses that would replace. From our discussions with the Fresno Unified Transportation folks, the number of buses that operate just within that boundary doesn't add up to 16. And so it might be possible that that might be the right balance of funding the infrastructure and then the targeted number of buses that operate within the community. But we will do that assessment and let you all know where we're landing with the budget at our next meeting.
I see Bill has a question, but before we get there, I see Dr. Curry has a question in the chat that was kind of related. So are the natural gas buses serving the AB 617 area?
Dr. Curry, that was our understanding when we asked them about the buses. Yes, so this would be replacing existing buses that are right now, polluting or emitting emissions in the area with the electric buses.
Thank you. The second question I had really is just to see that I think Brian has talked about PG&E having some resources to support infrastructure, and have we been able to sort of flesh that out or see how that might help to address their concerns about infrastructure costs?
That's a great question. I don't know if Brian on our team has a better kind of what the nexus is, right, between infrastructure with PG&E and then the district's funding.
Yeah, I think that's a question that we need to, have with them a discussion. I mean, the PG&E process can take some time based on our experience with what Richland is doing in Shafter, but they certainly can be a very good resource there where we might be able to leverage some funds and do some of that. So I think as we have these discussions about the school buses, the very next questions need to be, okay, you're going to do X number of buses. Now let's talk about the infrastructure and how we can put those pieces together.
And I will offer just to something that was really emphasized by Ralph Meza, who's the director of transportation at Fresno Unified, is they feel strongly, based on some of the experiences they've heard from other school districts, about getting the infrastructure in as quickly as possible. We have that ability with the CERC funding because it's already a program that's approved and ready to go. So maybe just to support what Brian was saying, we can connect, again, it's maybe a conversation, but we can connect them with the PG&E process. But as much as we can use some of this CERC funding and get that parallel process of them installing infrastructure and purchasing buses, which does take some time, especially with the, I'll just call it, I guess, COVID-related supply chain issues. That way we get these out into the community as soon as possible.
Bill, thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Yes, I just was wondering a question or two. Did they mention anything with, or maybe you have this information from the school districts that you have that are operating the electric buses? Are they able to get enough charge on them to run like the morning shift and the afternoon shift? I was curious if, depending on the school district's routes and so forth, if that might have been a consideration, that they were concerned they couldn't charge them enough overnight, in order to do a morning shift and an afternoon shift. And then another question was that on the CNG buses, do you folks have a way to measure the different ones to actually see how bad they are or not, or aren't, as far as or is this just general knowledge that we think that since they're older, they pollute more? And then the next item was that could be of concern, particularly with the past supply chain issues. I was wondering if they'd be concerned with having that many buses, that if they were having problems, the potentially not being able to pick up and take home the kids. That could be quite a problem if you didn't have too many extra buses in your fleet, to take care of it if parts weren't readily available. I'm not sure on the technology, how much available it is to get these electric buses fixed, or replacement batteries and all the longevity issues that
Right.
I'm sure that we all want them to have the best buses available, but we probably wouldn't be happy if they couldn't pick up our kids and take them home because their buses too many of them were inoperable.
Bill,
That
you
was it.
yes. So sorry, I
Oh, and then
started
the
to
next thing is,
Can
the
I
next thing is,
answer
I
some of your
would think
questions
that
and then
when they go out of town on the field trips, that they may want to keep a certain amount of buses for the longer trips. How they go on these.
right. And Bill, I might start to answer your questions because I have probably like
Fill
3 or
up somewhere
4.
out of town.
Okay, yeah, it's not, and let me know if I stop or I missed any of your questions, because I think you had a lot of really great questions, and I know folks that were at the meeting hopefully can support what I'm about to say, because a lot of that came up. So the first question, just in general about charging, that was a concern, and the Fresno Unified Transportation folks mentioned that they've been in contact with several of the school districts that have done large replacements and really invested heavily in in electric buses. So that originally certainly is why they want charging to be a big part of their purchase, like kind of at the same time. But also one of the things they're working with us on assessing is charging locations, not just at the bus yard, but maybe at like a high school. They were talking about maybe Roosevelt and the main bus yard, so that they can kind of charge in between, I think to your point, to do sort of morning and afternoon without any sort of what we call range anxiety, right? Where you worry that you don't have enough charge. So they were pretty clear about some of the barriers they felt like were there, and we were kind of, as a group, and certainly with the CSC support, hopeful that we were going to provide enough sort of, tools to overcome those barriers. So that's part of that infrastructure discussion we're having, is to maybe install it in several different locations. Your second question about our understanding, and let me know if I'm mischaracterizing this, Brian, but our understanding of emissions is from emissions factors. So it's known, at least the baseline emissions factor. And so based on the year, the model year of the engine itself and the bus itself, and maybe certainly even some other things that have had like retrofit, there's a variety of things that happen with buses. We know what those emissions are, or generally are, in terms of, so it's not just an assumption, oh, it's old, it might be bad, but it's a known emissions factor. Dodds, did I characterize that really?
You got that exactly right. It's based on the certification levels of those engines compared to what a new engine would be, in this case, a zero emission bus. So.
And then the third thing, and stop me or help me if I don't answer all these, because I think your last question, and this came up several times during the meeting, is Mr. Ralph Meza from Fresno Unified said several times safety was his #1 concern. And safety in regards to your point, Bill, about buses running out or breaking down and not having backup buses, or having a backup bus that's like a diesel or natural gas bus, sort of defeating the purpose, might not be the safest way to transport kids. He said he'd rather, in his mind as a transportation guy, right, he'd rather have a reliable bus he knows is going to get from point A to point B than presumably, in some cases, potentially, right, some other bus that he can't quite get the same support for. And in his mind, that might be the electric, based on his experience through other schools. I will say that the goal isn't to replace every single bus in their fleet at this moment, right? In the future, maybe range is better, and it's more ubiquitous that we have tons of electric buses everywhere. But for now, the goal is to really target and replace the buses that make sense. And so hopefully with this balance, they do feel comfortable. Like I said, they did reiterate their commitment, but all of those concerns you just raised were concerns they raised during that meeting with the trustees and with some of you.
Did that answer your questions? I'll take that as a yes. Bill, you have your hand up?
I can also, we do have, I'm super happy to take questions in the chat throughout the rest of the meeting if things come to mind or other concerns or questions. Like I said, we are committed to updating you on this as soon as we have an update at the next meeting. I do see Genevieve's chat caught my eye. So are the schools proposing a split between natural? No, they are proposing to go all electric. They are proposing to replace, instead of just their diesel buses, they have old natural gas buses they would like to replace to go to electric from natural gas. So we were asking Genevieve if there's any big objection to that. The only reason we ask is that technically in the SERP it says diesel to electric, and we wanted to make sure we were working with CSC support.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, I think we can move to our next agenda item, which is the wildfire resource and outreach. So as you all may be aware, fire seasons tend to keep getting worse each year, and we are currently in the midst of it. I know I have inhaled an unhealthy amount of smoke already this year. So this is just another important reminder for why the work we're doing is so important. There were some slides that we did not get to last meeting regarding the wildfire resources and outreach. So the Air District will now walk us through those slides and provide some additional updates, as well as important announcements regarding wildfire resources. So I will pass it back.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jamie Holt. I'm with the Valley Air District. I'm going to share my screen. I'm having some internet issues, so I'm actually going to pull this up on the internet rather than connect to, I'm having trouble connecting to where it is on our work files. So hopefully everyone can see that. If you can give me a thumbs up. Yep, I'm seeing head shaking. All right. So our number one priority when we have one of these severe wildfire events is make sure that the public is aware of what's going on. Fortunately, this year, we have not had in the Central Valley any big wildfire impacts, at least not to the level that we've seen over the past 3 years. So I keep telling people, knock on wood, fingers crossed, say your prayers, that continues into the fall. We are fairly early in the season. I like to remind folks that the Camp Fire, the one that received all the press and that really destroyed the community of Paradise several years ago, that one happened in mid-November. So we still have a lot of wildfire season to go. And we want to make sure folks are aware and prepared. So we do a lot of information sharing, both before wildfires hit and then during these events that we might have. We use our social media platforms, mobile apps, English and Spanish speaking media to get the word out. We also communicate directly with Valley schools to ensure that they're getting correct information so that they can make the right decisions for their students to keep them in when it's necessary. And then we do a lot of communicating directly through phone calls, emails, events. You all might remember it's not uncommon during wildfire season to receive an email from us directly. We do have multiple listservs that you can sign up for if you're just a member of the public so that you can get that messaging. It seems like everyone's on social media these days. We actually had a big conversation in my office earlier today about the rise of TikTok and about how we might begin to have a presence on TikTok. Right now, we are on 4 social media platforms. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Nextdoor. And I want to thank many of the residents here and also some of the other community members do a great job of helping share our messages and retweeting the things that we post. That's probably one of the best venues that we use to get information out about wildfires when we do have those big smoke impacts that are hitting the valley. The other thing that we like to promote is there's no one perfect place for you to go to get that real-time air quality information. There are actually several. So it's really what's going to work best for you. We actually have some examples here of mobile apps or mobile applications that you can pull up on your phone. We have our own. The first two images that you see there, if you're looking from left to right, that's the Valley Air app. It gives you real-time air quality data. It allows you to pull up both ozone and particulate matter data, and it will also show you the trends over time. So is air quality improving? Is it dropping? Is there, what's kind of happening out there in the world? Then you can see the EPA's Air Now application, and that's one that will show air quality. It is also fed, or it also gets its information from the district monitors, and it has lots of great information on it. The next one there, and if you really want like the most up-to-date and the most detailed information, it's the one that we recommend. It's also done by the EPA, and it's called the Air Now Fire and Smoke app. And if you go to fire.airnow.gov, you'll be able to pull it up. You can pull it up on your phone or on your computer screen. But what makes it different is that it also shows information from some purple air monitors that might be in the area. Those purple air monitors that have been validated as having really reliable data. And then it will also show information from the temporary monitors that we work with the land managers to put up in and around wildfires. So for example, the Washburn fire that happened here about a month ago, there was some temporary monitors that were put up near the fire to really gauge where the smoke was going. And those temporary monitors get fed into the fire and smoke map. And then we've got the purple air map. That's the one that really shows all of the citizen science or the personal air sensor data. And then of course, there's one more that's not on here. It's the SJV Air. That's the tool that Central California Asthma Collaborative and the Central California Environmental Justice Network have been working on. And it also is a mix of the regulatory monitors and then also the purple air monitors. We also have a web page that has links to a bunch of this information, and it's really easy to get to. I'm going to show you in just a minute, but it will show you the wildfires that are currently impacting the valley, and then give you a bunch of information that you can use to make decisions within your own family, your own household, your own neighborhood about how you can best protect yourself. We also have these fun little infographics there. Yes.
Jamie, oh, maybe Liz was going to do it too. I saw Kimberly's hand when you started that other slide.
Sure.
My question was pertaining to the slide previous. With the last slide, is the last monitor, is it only good for fire season or is it good for all year long? And does these tools calculate to pick up during the season, or are they only good for wildfire season? That's my question for all of them.
That's a good question, and they work year round. So they are up and running all of the time. The EPA's fire and smoke map, one of its enhancements is that it can also show where like a smoke plume, like a big smoke plume coming off of a wildfire, where it may be headed. And when that is the case, you can see kind of that enhancement where that smoke might be going. Of course, if there's no wildfire burning, then there would be no need to have that enhancement. So that's just why it's a little bit more valuable during wildfire season. But all of these are up and running all the time. And I know, and I don't know who's on the meeting tonight, but we were also working on getting the AB 617 monitor data into the AirNow system, so that data was also it's something that the data that was being read when you got the information through these pages or through these apps.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so we have lots of outreach pieces. So we did, Stephanie mentioned we're going to be at schools at the end of August, beginning of September. We're giving out a variety of information, and some of the information are little magnets that basically have this information on it. We recently did a big peach jar, using that peach jar feature that schools have that sends information out to parents via email. And we put this information in that big, it wasn't really a mailer, big email blast that we did through peach jar. A couple of the programs that we have up and running to specifically address some of the wildfire issues. One is
Jamie?
yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I see Lisa's hand came up. I just want to see if that was regarding the last slide you were on.
Yeah, actually it is. I see that you have translated into Hmong in Spanish. Have you thought about Punjabi?
We have right now, we're focused on the three top languages that the Fresno Unified, Central Unified, and Clovis Unified really prioritize. But we have let folks know that if they would like to have it in Punjabi, we can totally do that.
Because I know with some of the schools, I think that you might want to do Punjabi. So, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
Jamie, I just have a comment under where it says where the masks are at. We all know that it's an N95 or a N95 or whatever. So asking our doctor which mask is best to protect us from wildfire smoke, I think that should be changed on the flyer as well. Just another suggestion, we know with the MERV 13 filter that we get the best quality air or up. So maybe having that on there as well as staying any filter, because with any filter, you're going to be constantly changing them during wildfire season. So that's just a couple of suggestions.
Great, thank you. We will totally take those back and look into updating it. All right, let me know if there are more questions because it's tough for me to see them. So the Clean Air Center pilot program, this is a recently launched program that offers our vulnerable population, our unhoused individuals, a place to go to get respite from these extreme episodes of poor air quality that accompany our, when we're being inundated with wildfire smoke. So we are working to set up a network of clean air centers on par with the cooling centers that are available in the Valley, so that folks have an opportunity to find a place where they can go and get out of that wildfire smoke. Now, what's unique about this as compared to the Clean Air Room program, these are huge. Think the size of a refrigerator. These are really big pieces of equipment that would go into, say, a library or community center, or even a I know when we brought this up before, folks have mentioned the potential a nonprofit potentially making their offices available. So we have this program. We are I think we're about to reopen it, the RFP, one more time to get a few additional applications. So if you know anyone that might be interested, if you know any entities that might be interested, have them reach out to us. We would love to have as many of these up and running as possible. Brian, are we going to reopen it? Is that correct?
That is correct, Jamie. Probably next week we'll have that relaunched and open again for additional applications.
So if you could share word about the Clean Air Center with any organization or facility, even a church that might have, want to have we want it to be a place where the public can go on a regular basis. So they don't have to be open 24/7, but they do need to be open, at least during normal business hours for the public to go.
Jamie, have we got a lot of traction on the application for the air centers?
It depends on the county. I know in some counties we've had lots of applications, and in other counties we're lagging behind. Brian, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, Tulare County and Fresno County actually were doing pretty good. During the last solicitation, we got a number of applications from the Fresno County Library System. And so we're doing pretty good there, but we need to do some outreach and get even more, because we will still have quite a bit of money and funding available for additional centers.
Have we reached out to, or has the Air District reached out to like the parks that are within the boundary of AB 617? They're used for cooling centers, heating centers. I think that would be something great to tap into.
Yeah, we'll be going back to a lot of our county contacts and kind of reinforcing the options that are out there. But we have done a lot of outreach so far through the counties and trying to network through those contacts that we have. But I do think that would be a good nexus there at Kimberly to have those same facilities open that are clean, or that are cooling centers also be clean air centers.
Thank you.
So see that Lilia has her hand up.
Sí. Otra vez, aquí de nuevo. Estoy mirando es el programa que tienen de los pilotos de los programas de los aires. No sé si sea el mismo. Hace que Nayamin me trajo un papel, nomás que Nayamin ahorita no está aquí, no la veo aquí en la reunión. Pero Nayamin me trajo un papel donde hay programas que están calificando ahorita para purificadores de aires adentro de los hogares. ¿Ustedes lo tienen ese programa o ustedes lo están proveyendo? Ok, si es así, entonces necesito tener esas aplicaciones, porque ya tengo registradas algunas 25 personas que las quieren, residentes del AB 617.
Yes, this is my next slide, and I will talk about the second program that we have. So I was talking about clean air centers. I was talking about clean air centers on the last slide. Now I'm going to talk about the clean air room pilot program. The purpose of this is to give residents clean air purifiers. These are the smaller purifiers. They look more like, they're small. They're like maybe 2 feet high. They would sit in a living room or in a bedroom, and we're giving those out free to residents in disadvantaged communities through our Clean Air Pilot Room program. So they are to help folks set up what we call a clean air room. So a clean air room would be a room in your home where you would keep doors and windows shut. You would make sure that you're not, smoking or lighting any candles or using any like a gas stove or anything else that might create pollution. You're gonna plug in and run your clean air purifier that you get through the Air District, or if you don't get one through the Air District, you can buy one at a big box store, or you can make one yourself. And that has been shown to dramatically improve the air quality in your home. So I'm going to show you real quick how to get to this pilot program, how to sign up. If you need assistance, I would say give us a call, and I will make a point, if Stephanie can make a note, to have someone, Lilia, give you a call tomorrow and see if we can't get all of your folks put into the program. But I'll show you where to go. It's really easy. There's not a lot that you have to do to be able to take advantage of the program. You do have to live in one of our disadvantaged communities. So that's South Central Fresno, and you do need to have some type of proof of your address. And those are really the basic questions that we ask for. We are taking these applications. It is limited. We don't have a ton of funding for this program. This program is the valley-wide program that is not tied to AB 617. There is a desire from this community and from some of our other communities to be able to have a very specific AB 617 program. So that's coming, but this is the one that we just wanted to get up and running as quickly as possible. So at least there was some type of option out there for the public prior to wildfire season. And I see lots of hands, but before I go there, let me just show you how you get there. So if you're on our homepage, valleyair.org, over here on the left, hit grants and incentives. Go to residents. The very first thing is the Clean Air Room Pilot Program. Click on that, and here's all the information about the program, but really you're just going to go to Apply Now. So you go to Apply Now. I'm just going to put my information in here. Oh, I think that will work. Just to see if I qualify. I happen to know, just because of where I actually do qualify, but I'm not taking advantage of the program. So then I've checked my eligibility. I can go to apply. I then go in and I ask for just some basic information. And I will tell you, you can toggle this back and forth between English and Spanish. So if you're a Spanish speaker, you can do it in Spanish as well. So let me do this again. Apply. I would put all of my information in here. It's going to ask me some just really basic information so that we can report back a little bit on who was taking advantage of the program. Basic demographic information, and then proof of residency, PG&E, SoCal Edison, public utility, cable or internet bill, just to make sure that folks really do live in the disadvantaged community that they say they're going to live in. You click that, you know, all the small print and then enter the text to make sure you're not a robot, and then submit application, and it will automatically go to us. If there's anything wrong with your application, we will give you a call and make sure that we get all the correct information. And once we have all that information, you will be sent in the mail from our hardware company partner a air purifier for your home. You don't have to pay anything. It's just, it will come in the mail. We're looking at about a 2 to 3 week turnaround time. So that's the Clean Air Room Valley-wide pilot program. Again, I want to mention we do plan to have some very specific AB 617 programs, and we'll be talking more with you all about what those might look like down the road. With that, I'd be happy to answer questions about that, and then I'm going to show you a few other things.
Go ahead, Kimberly.
Jamie, I know when this program first rolled out, we thought that a lot of residents were going to take advantage of this. Do you know how many applications have you received right now?
Brian could tell you that, but I think we're knocking on 200 in Fresno County.
Okay, and how many air monitors are you guys distributing to residents? Do we have a ballpark number, or it's just when you close it?
Brian, do you have that right in front of you?
Yeah, so we're estimating in Fresno that it would be just short of 300, and that's based on the kind of population of each county. We've got about 90 spots available for new applications as of this evening.
Okay, so all of the applications that you have been receiving have been within the boundary or within the disadvantaged communities, and none has been turned away, correct?
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay, and just one more suggestion. I know that the application is available in English and Spanish, but it would be helpful to have other languages on there because there are other nationalities that live in the disadvantaged communities that will be able to take advantage of this as well. So being able to have it available like in Hmong and Punjabi, as Lisa has stated, would be very beneficial to residents who live in these disadvantaged communities. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. I think we can go to Lisa. You're next.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I just want to let everybody know that I have a couple of people who have applied for this as my little beta testers to see how it goes. And the first person basically got rejected from the get-go because, and this is the weirdest thing, her street address is different than her federal mailing address for the same home in Visalia. So there is a glitch in the system that nobody understands about. That's the first thing. What's the second thing? Second thing, have we thought about expanding this? Because there are some families with multiple asthma residents living in the same home. And I know one of these little machines isn't going to take care of everybody in the family. So is there an opportunity for an applicant maybe to get two if they have a child with asthma?
Those, at this point, we are so limited on the funds. Again, this is not the AB 617 program. This is just the initial.
No, I understand that.
Valley-wide, and we're limited on funds for this pilot program, but those are exactly the type of things that I think we want to discuss with the steering committee as we look at rolling out an AB 617 program.
Yep. And Lisa, to your first comment, I mean, we'd be happy to help anybody where we've experienced some issues with addresses, and people can call us. We're happy to help them, and we can kind of work through those types of issues if they're still experiencing problems.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa, are you able to possibly connect those people with the Air District to get help with the glitch?
Possibly.
Okay. You can let us know.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Estela? Estela, do you have a question?
Sí, buenas tardes. Sí, yo nomás que tengo una pregunta sobre los filtros de aire. Me supongo que tienen un reemplazo de donde se junta toda lo sucio, ¿verdad? Y que eso, ¿dónde lo podemos conseguir? ¿Dónde lo compramos? El reemplazo, pues, del filtro. Porque pienso que sí tienen un filtro por dentro.
That's correct. And
So,
go ahead, Jamie.
so,
¿Y dónde los podemos conseguir? ¿Ahí en la Home Depot o dónde los podemos conseguir?
it depends on the type of filter you're specifically talking about. If you're talking about the free air purifiers that we're sending out, you can get those replacement filters at most hardware stores. If you're talking about the filters that maybe go in your home, maybe you have a home air conditioning system, or maybe you have your own air purifier that you got outside of our district grant program. It depends on the type And I would say find out what the type is and search. Some of them are as easy to get as, you know, your local Walmart or Target or Costco will have them. I know I have one and I have to order it online. And it, you know, I order it through Amazon. So it really depends on what type of filter you're talking about and as to where you can get it.
Sí, del filtro que estoy diciendo es como el que ustedes están proporcionando del programa que ustedes tienen.
Brian, can you speak to that? Does it come with an extra? I don't remember how we're doing it.
Yeah, so the process is everybody that participates in the program would get a device that comes with a filter and one replacement filter. So you'll essentially have 2 filters to start off with. Beyond that, additional filters could be purchased online or through local hardware stores. That, you know, these would need to be replaced from time to time down the road, but we wanted everybody to at least get started with a couple of new ones for the fire season and beyond that as needed.
And do you know what the cost of those filters are? Just ballpark it.
$25 or so, $20 to $25, I think, for the most part.
And do you have any sort of coupons or anything? Because I'm a big couponer.
We don't at this time.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Gracias.
Just real quick. Oh, I see another question.
Hey y'all, this is Genevieve. I know there's talks about potentially developing a 617 program like this. And for that, I think we should definitely think about providing more filters or coupons for filters because, I mean, it is expensive, especially for low income residents. And like I think some research came out today that said a lot of people are right now not able to afford food. And so if you're also asking for a $25 filter, it's not going to be like people are going to go to keep a roof over their head and food on the table. So I would definitely, for the 617 program, advocate for more filters or coupons for filters or free filters when replacement is needed.
And I noted that, Genevieve, and just to reiterate, and you are on that list, Stephanie is going to send out a note about, I keep calling it a subcommittee, but it's certainly at least one, if not a couple of meetings where we have those discussions with you all on the residential program. And I think what you just said is another great note in addition to some of the other notes we've already taken. So thanks for that.
So I think I'm over my time. So just real quick, a couple of things. One, if you want to take advantage of the Clean Air Room program, please reach out to us. Either go online and sign up yourself or give us a call really quickly. We do anticipate it selling out probably, if not this week, then definitely next week. And then last but not least, if you want to get to our wildfire page, just go to valleyair.org and click right in the center on that on the wildfire. And you can see the good news is that there are currently no wildfires impacting the valley. That could change at any minute, pretty much. And this gives you how to make your own air purifier. It's the DIY temporary air purifier that there's some studies that have shown that it works just as well as these store-bought ones. It's basically a MERV 13 filter, a box fan, and some duct tape. So we've been demoing that at a lot of events we've been going to. And then just a lot of information from the EPA, from CARB, and some other links up here about wildfire. Right up here at the top, this last thing I'm going to pull up is the EPA's fire and smoke map that I was talking about. And fortunately, right now, whoops, I went the wrong way. We don't have any wildfires burning in pretty much all of California, but There are some burning way up here in Northern California. And I just want to point this out because what's great about this, so the fires are burning here. I think one's called the McKinney fire. And this kind of grayness is where the smoke is going. So that's a feature that's only on this fire and smoke map, but you can kind of see the different levels of smoke that it looks like folks kind of up in the Mount Shasta area, just to the west of Redding are kind of dealing with right now. So hopefully for the time being, we don't have any fires hitting the valley, but that's just a great resource for you, our fire and smoke map, or I should say EPA's fire and smoke map. Then of course our RAN system and all of the other tools that I mentioned. I'll be happy to answer any more questions. I'm just gonna stop sharing so I can see the screens a little better.
Are there any questions about the wildfire resources presentation? Okay. My cat is joining us. So we're actually running pretty on schedule right now. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. So we'll move on to our next agenda item, and that is the standing updates. Since we ran out of time in the previous meetings for standing updates, we are intentionally setting aside some time tonight to hear about subcommittee and agency updates to really ensure that you all, the steering committee, are informed of all of these latest activities. So I'll be calling on co-leads from each subcommittee to provide the update. And as a reminder, updates should be just around 4 minutes per subcommittee. CSC members, if possible, please hold your questions until the end of the update, or feel free to post them in the chat. And I think to start, we are going to hear about the truck reroute, and that will be with Andrena from the city of Fresno. Oh no, actually, Jess, you're taking over.
I am. So the folks from the city were unable to be here. But those of you that are a part of the truck reroute subcommittee, hopefully got an invite to participate in a doodle poll to schedule that first kickoff meeting. I know I'm on that list and I got that invite. I've seen a few of you fill it out. I got that about a week ago. So if you are a part of that truck reroute subcommittee and did not see that invite or want a reminder, let me know and I can resend that email out to you. It came from the contractor from the city. And from there, they're planning that first kickoff meeting where I know a lot of the conversation we had at the last meeting about outreach strategy and connecting with communities will be discussed because it will be both the contractor and the outreach partner in attendance. That's all I have in terms of that update, and I don't know if there's any questions that I can maybe answer. Lisa.
Do we have anybody from the city at this meeting today at all?
We do not. The folks that we have been coordinating with did let us know that they were unable to attend. So it looks like that's what's happening.
So they just are moving along with their planning and changes in the city that are going to affect our truck reroute and without coming to talk to us.
You're talking about some city plans outside of the truck reroute study?
Yeah, that's going to impact our study. Okay, that's all I need to know.
I was going to say, I have a second update for land use. If there's no questions about truck reroute, is that we do want and are planning diligently with them on scheduling very soon a land use subcommittee where I think your questions, I saw Ivanka's hand, but your questions, Lisa, in terms of city planning processes we still plan to schedule that and address that directly in that land use subcommittee meeting.
Yeah, but they're having a city council meeting and they may be deciding on some things that impact us. And it would have been really nice for them to at least show up and talk to us. So, that is a really grave concern.
Thank you, Lisa. I noted that. And I also noted Dr. Curry's note. I will reach out to the contractor and the city, Dr. Curry, to make sure we get you involved. And then I see Ivanka.
I'm sorry, did I miss it, or is there nobody? There's nobody from the city, but is there anybody from the engagement contractor on tonight for the truck reroute, the consultant?
No, and that can certainly be a request that we have at the next meeting. They're scheduling a kickoff meeting with the folks that were involved. And I believe, Ivanka, you're on that subcommittee.
Yeah, I don't, like, I think one of my concerns with their scope of work to do the engagement is that being on the subcommittee, it's making sure that they, as the consultant, are fully engaging the whole steering committee. And then the other portion that I was really expecting Scott to be on the call tonight, as Lisa said, regarding the truck reroute study update, is that our city is continually trying to move forward with a variety of industrial plans, whether that's permitting new projects for new industrial businesses within our 617 boundary. And it is counterintuitive, and it's not even counterintuitive. It really is just a strategic move by the city to try to push through developments that are within the 617 before this truck reroute study is finished. The key word is study / analysis to decide where trucks can be rerouted. So the city strategically is trying to push through different projects along Central Avenue for the benefit of increased industrial development that is totally going to impact the community members in that area. However, if they can solidify and put allocations of major 2.5 and above millions of dollars into these projects, where these projects are specific to expanding the intersections on Central Avenue, or allowing for outlets from future Amazon facility land for their truck parking to exit onto Central Avenue, or to create more increased truck movement into Southwest Fresno along Jensen Avenue. We are strategically seeing the city trying to support industrial development by getting these projects passed before the truck route is finished. So then once we get to the point of this consultant that we've hired for this truck reroute, their job is to do an analysis of what roads can actually be reroute. But if you have, as a city, purposely allowed plans to go through, even though this is a pending process, then it appears that you now can't reroute off of Jensen. You now can't reroute off of Central Avenue. Oh, because why? Because the city already allowed funding to start these projects and allow these projects to break ground. So it's a very something that needs to be discussed with Scott. As we speak, they are bringing a project to the consent calendar tomorrow at City Council, where if I hadn't reached out to the council member who didn't even realize they were trying to slide one in, the city is also responsible for a settlement with some of the 617 within the boundary residents in South Central, where the city has committed to trying to make sure that they are reducing impacts. But then on the other hand, they're trying to increase these programs. So to me, we have that as a 617 body. We need to be aware of that, and that the city is really kind of holding back on letting us see the whole picture. So they're allowing us to move forward thinking we're doing some good, making a truck study, knowing quite well that they're pushing through projects that once those projects, if they're allocated their funding or the contractors are moving forward to break ground, then it will be that much harder to reroute these trucks. So I want to share that with you all, because these impacts are happening right in front of residents' homes on Central Avenue. And if you haven't seen the news, we had the Attorney General out there yesterday. And so he got to actually feel the physical impacts of what it's like to sit in the front yard of some of these residents and feel it himself. So we shouldn't, as he had stated, you don't need to sacrifice for human cost for the development of more industry, yet we are somewhat a part of that right now. And we're not at this committee being able to see the whole picture if the city's not sharing that with us. So yeah, that's what's happening.
I definitely thank you, Ivanka and Lisa, for bringing that, and Ivanka for your explanation. I think to your point, these are the types of discussions we want to have at the committee level, whether they're community driven or city driven. And I do hear the disappointment, I think, in some of your comments, certainly of not having it from the city level, but I want to just express appreciation. I know if there's appreciation on this committee for folks like you that do bring that up to this group. And so I just want to express that. And certainly, of course, share all the notes that I just heard with Scott and the other, the rest of Greg and the other sort of planning team as well. It's not just Public Works, of course. I will say that I do also hear your comments, Ivanka, about communicating directly with the CSC in terms of the contractor, and not just doing these sort of subcommittees, but maybe making a presence certainly at these meetings, at least to sit here and listen to the kind of the broader discussions is what I heard. So I think that's a recommendation that'll come from me, but I think also when we have that kickoff meeting, anyone on this committee that also agrees with Ivanka, let's all make that same point to that group, together. I think that would be really helpful. And that's an action item for us is to do that outreach as well.
Yeah, I appreciate Ivanka bringing all of those issues to light. I think they continue to highlight the discussion we had about having an MOU with the city where we had better communication.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that we're working on this, and as you mentioned, 48 meetings, and we're still having to wonder how this is really going to impact going forward, whether or not the communities that are already disadvantaged, already overpolluted, are going to receive any relief. And I think that the challenge is that even when we are doing all that we can to put in place mitigation measures and adaptation measures, that there's still that question of the city having transparency with the state, because this is a state program. And so what is the solution to bringing more heat on the city in terms of respecting the process that's been started, and also the concerns that families have about air quality and all of these other issues? I mean, we could spin around and keep doing this, but what are some things that we can do differently that would apply some pressure to actually say that these efforts are significant, and we don't want someone undermining them even as we try to get them off the ground? And I think that's a different discussion, but I don't think we are going to move forward without having that kind of discussion.
I think that discussion is important. And I think that's a discussion after last month's meeting that I think is clear. You all heard from the city that they are not pursuing an MOU with the district. And I think to your point, then you're right in that there needs to be some sort of alternative, creative discussion and approach. And maybe what we're doing collectively isn't quite, or I shouldn't say maybe, it isn't, right, hitting the mark, obviously. Otherwise, you guys wouldn't have all these comments. And I think to your point, and I know it was a comment last meeting, I think we do need to have, regardless, and I mentioned earlier, we're hoping to set up soon a land use subcommittee meeting. And I think it needs to be more directed and not just, okay, what's the MOU? Because at this point, we've heard pretty clear from the city that that's not the case, but maybe some of these other questions. And I'd be happy to even work with a few of you to maybe create that agenda and propose maybe some questions that we pose to the city that are a little more directed about that community engagement and work.
Well, I appreciate that. I think beyond the questioning, because I think in some ways we have their answer already. It's their pattern of practice and what they continue to do. I guess my concern and question really is, what are other measures that we can take as an organized group, having met so many times and having seen this issue really clearly? What are some other ways and some other levers that we can pull and begin to do something different? Because I don't see that there's movement or the will to move in a different direction.
Yeah, I'm writing that down, and I wonder if part of that discussion isn't necessarily a discussion, like you said, a question for the city, but a discussion among ourselves, with that being maybe our main prompting question is what other things can we do collectively? And of course, I'll take it back to our team, you know, to see if there's other thoughts as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bill, I see your hand is raised. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm not sure what exactly Ivanka and Ms. Curry was talking about, but also June 28th, Stephanie sent out a letter to the CSC, or an email, and I don't know if anyone noticed, but under Caltrans, under the updates section of Caltrans, well, they discussed about working with the city to get some funds and so forth, and they want to perhaps create a public truck parking lot, which I don't know what, you know, I had kind of the same thoughts as some of the previous. We're spending over $1 million on a truck reroute program, and then, you know, a week later, you know, whenever it was, the 28th of June, we get sent with an update from the Caltrans identifying that they're working on putting together a plan to put in a public truck parking lot. Now, I don't know if any of you have had any experience with truck parking lots, but it's, you know, if you have a truck parking lot, you know, it can have a tendency to draw unscrupulous behavior, you know, without going into details. So, you know, my experience has been if you want to provide free truck parking, you need to do it under the auspices of a private owned facility where they have some control over, you know, drug traffic and prostitution and all that sort of thing. And, you know, I mean, it would be nice to have one, but I don't know that we want one in our neighborhood, because I could see where it would draw trucks from all over the valley, because there's no other public truck parking lot that I'm aware of anywhere. So, you know, if we're trying to lessen the truck traffic in the community, I don't think that would be the way to do it. And also, you know, in that, which would affect me and other private people, they're talking about perhaps having you know, alternative green fuels, you know, renewable fuels. I assume they're talking about, you know, CNG, hydrogen, electric, and whatnot. And, you know, as somebody that's in that industry, is trying very hard to go to some of these alternative energies that are very, very expensive. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars, and then have a government entity want to go in competition with you, maybe even across the street, who knows, it is really disheartening, because, you know, the money that supports Caltrans is derived from fuel cells, you know, whether it's the taxes or whatever, you know. So, you know, I just don't know where this agency that put this on the go back to the June 28th thing from Stephanie, and I won't take up any more of your time, but I think it might be worthwhile if there's other measures that are being snuck in to maybe discuss this one as well, if that happens to be something the community interests them. That's all I have to say. Thank
Bill,
you.
I wrote down that exact part of the discussion as part of what it sounds like a broader discussion of projects needs to be. So thank you. And I just want to note really quickly that I think Genevieve made some really great points in the chat, certainly about electrifying all the trucks. That's one of the measures. And so I'll just remind folks, and maybe that's something that we can talk about a little bit at our next meeting as well. And I don't remember exactly when it popped in, but I don't want to mischaracterize. So Genevieve maybe put in the chat your failure of 617. I'm wondering if that's related to the sort of the lack of accountability that it has for kind of partner agencies, in particular land use agencies. I'm not sure if that's related to what you were mentioning, if it was something different.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant in response to what Ivanka was saying, and how 617s really fail to hold our local government accountable or really change their practices in any way.
Thank you, Genevieve. All right, I can go to the other two, Liz. I'll let you facilitate the questions.
I lost my mute button. Yes, go ahead, Ivanka. You're muted.
Thank you, first of all, Bill, for uplifting the parking, the trucking parking as another issue for that bigger conversation. And, you know, at this point, I do feel that it's very possible that we need to have the truck study and the land use all in one discussion, because it's not necessarily separate if it's a variety of projects that are inundating the 617 boundary. And I guess this, my next point is a question to Brian or anybody at CARB, for the fact that when we started this process in February, when the SERP was approved a while back, part of the resolution was to include some form of agreement or an MOU. And so if at this point, the city is not pursuing the MOU, as Jessica stated, then where is the enforcement from CARB to make them follow through with what that resolution is with the air district? So yeah, I don't know exactly who can answer that. We may not have time to dig into that. Like Denise had said, or Jessica, you said just having an off conversation without the city being present, but that cannot be just a moot point where we don't follow up on that piece, because so much of what we have shared with the Attorney General of our state yesterday is based around the lack of notification in the environmental justice organization. So if you have our Attorney General focusing on our county, that is really embarrassing to me. But he's making his rounds to make sure, and the moving pieces, whether it's the Air Resource Board, where it's Strategic Growth Council, we are receiving funding from multiple state agencies, right? To improve our county, our city, our most disadvantaged communities. And this city is still being allowed to move forward as if they don't have to answer to these authorities. And so that, to me, is part of that bigger conversation that we have to have, because it's almost just like we're a bunch of little mice keeping us busy in a mouse trap without our necks getting snapped, but we keep going around in this maze when we know that there's strategically we are being played. And so like it's been stated, how do we continue, and what are those next steps? I really think that we need to put more emphasis, and that, I think, would in itself take up a whole meeting.
Thank you, Ivanka. Jess, did you want to respond?
I was going to say, I think Brian had a direct response. I don't know if he wants to go or.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. And yeah, Ivanka, in that resolution, it carved a direct the Air District to work with the city to develop an MOU or another appropriate mechanism of collaboration, right? So I think kind of intrinsic to that word appropriate is that it's like achieving the goal. So if this isn't, I'll check back with our staff to see if we have any options. As you all know, we don't have any direct authority over local jurisdictions, but I think you're right, Ivanka. It's a larger discussion, but I will ask around starting tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Brian. Lisa, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yes, I kind of had this discussion with some people in Sacramento today, actually. And here's the funny thing. We're 48 meetings in, And has anything really changed? And the answer is no. You know, I go to the city council meeting. Occasionally I see Ivanka there and other folks, and we speak up on the things we need to speak up on when it comes to planning. I go to the occasional planning commission meeting. I'm involved with my review committee and such. And to me, it's just so disingenuous, not only of the planning department, but also the public works department, of what they're trying to pull. And I don't appreciate it. And I also have requested district staff to attend some of these city council meetings. And I believe even a few of these planning commission meetings. And I'm hoping and I'm praying staff shows up. And when I show up and I sit through, you know, a 6-hour meeting, there's no one from the air district. So, you know, part of our credibility is the air district showing up and commenting on some of these projects as well, and addressing some of our concerns as an AB 617 committee to the city council. Because trust me, they get tired of hearing stuff from me. But, you know, Jessica, you show up with the authority, with your, you know, your nice, big, wonderful designation in the air district. And guess what? They're going to listen to you a little bit more. So, you know, I think that, you know, not only do we have to step up, they have to step up, but also district staff needs to think about stepping up. I mean, we can have meetings until we're blue in the face, but as we spin our wheels and spend that time, they're going to go ahead and push through things. We're dealing with a city that has still not done their environmental justice element for their general plan. That just screams to me, we're going to try to get it all in before we get another 2-year exemption. And we're going to build where we want to build. We're going to change municipal code so we don't have to really do that much of CEQA, that one person in the planning department can sign off on it. That's what that tells me. And that the last 2.5 years has been a folly, that us allocating money for that truck reroute is a folly. And I don't know about you, and I don't know about anybody else on this committee, but I do not appreciate people wasting my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Does anyone from the air district want to respond?
I think that I took all the notes, and I think just adds to Lisa's point, and I'll definitely certainly talk with our team about her request of the district, but I think it adds to, it sounds like all of the other points about really bringing the city to the table. And I agree at this point in terms of, we've had a lot of meetings and lots of interactions, but in terms of something that relates to that resolution that Ivanka mentioned earlier, you know, we're not there, right? So we definitely, I think, owe you all a meeting, several meetings, I think, to address some of the comments I made earlier. So thank you. And I do see, and I was about to mention the same thing. Thank you, Dr. Curry, with the county as well. I think that's an important aspect.
Meetings are great. We need movement more than glacier movement.
Thank you, Lisa. So we are, it's currently 7:23. So we can take one last question and I think move the rest of the updates to email, if that's okay with the committee. Genevieve, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, I just want to echo Ivanka, Lisa's comments. The metaphor of spinning the wheels and being stuck in a trap really resonate with me. And I think I also feel Lisa's being tired of meetings that go nowhere, and so, or being told that we don't have the regulatory authority, you know, we can't control what the city or the county does. So I want to just at the end of this meeting refocus on what we can do. And the air district and CARB has significant authority over sources of pollution in this community. and I've said this before, and I will say it again, and I hope we can put it on the agenda, but the South Coast Air District passed an indirect source rule for warehouses, requiring a large percentage of those trucks to go zero emission. And if we could do that just for the 617 community, requiring all of those warehouses or sources that are attracting trucks to make them go zero emission, which we have the authority to do, the district has the authority to do, we could have really significant pollution reduction benefits, public health benefits, instead of just, you know, bemoaning the fact that the city is doing a terrible job. We can do something here. The district has authority, CARP has authority. And so I would really like for us to focus on that, and add it as a potential agenda item for next meetings, discuss what an indirect source rule is and what the benefits could be, because I'm getting sick and tired of running in a circle in a trap. Thank you.
And I rose my hand just to mention that we're certainly happy to bring a discussion not only of, to Genevieve's point, an indirect source rule and what it could be, but also a discussion of South Coast's rule. We're happy to have that discussion at an upcoming meeting.
Okay, well.
And then maybe just to support you, Liz, in moving everything else to updates, maybe I can just in 2 seconds summarize the rest of the updates, or at least from the tree subcommittee, the remaining district update, which is the RFPs are still open. And I think Stephanie provided a good update earlier of our next steps in terms of outreach to schools. So we will send out an email to summarize other things. Thank you.
Bill, I see your hand.
Yes, just one quick comment. You know what would be nice, at least for me, I haven't been on these committees before, so this whole thing has been a learning experience for me, but it's disheartening, you know, when I look at all the time that's been wasted. You know, when we started the truck reroute program, I tried to bring up, you know, can we discuss what some of the solutions are going to be or could be before we, you know, spend $1 million, and we've already wasted way over a year and it's not even really started yet. You know, I think if we could maybe have a meeting where maybe it's not even recorded or whatever, where, you know, like Ed and some of the others, and then Ivanka, you know, people discuss solutions, not just what we can't do, but maybe what we can do in a better way, you know, where, you know, if we can't just tell the city or the state or whatever, you can't do this, you can't do that. But if we could come up with maybe some possible workable solutions that would be better for everybody involved, you know, maybe we could get somewhere quicker. You know, I don't know. It's just, I just hate to see all this time being wasted and nothing happens positive. Nothing gets better. You know, it's just, you know, we just do studies and we just talk about it, but what gets done, you know, but that's.
And if I can just really quickly support Liz, what Bill just mentioned. So I think Bill is mentioning something similar to what Dr. Curry said earlier, of like coming to the table with some prompting questions and having really a solutions oriented discussion, particularly surrounding the land use issue and truck rerouting issue. I do want to remind folks, and I know that it's a part of, there's so much happening, but I do want to remind you all that the rest of the CERC, not that I'm trying to disregard all of everything you're saying, I'm saying in addition to what you're saying, the rest of the CERC is aimed at trying to target those emissions reductions. There is a lot of funding for getting electric trucks out there, for charging infrastructure, for replacing fireplaces, for getting air purifiers in homes. So there's a lot going on in parallel. So I think we just need to remind ourselves to work in parallel to continue to push those forward while we also tackle this super important issue that I agree hasn't moved forward as quickly as something like some of the enforcement measures or other types of measures that we do have control over. I do hear you all certainly about the spinning the wheels and having meetings, and I do think that we heard some really great prompting questions that'll allow us to have a more solutions oriented discussion. So I think I just appreciate all of that feedback. And I'll go ahead and take Lisa's question.
Well, we can come up with, some creative solutions from the beginning, but we can't really force that into how the study is done, because the study has to be as scientifically based as possible with data, because that is really going to be the thing that drives it. But I think that we also see a trend from their planning and development and public works of how the city is trying to influence the study, which is, of course, is not appreciated. Oh goodness, what else did I want to say? I totally forgot what I wanted to say. But I think it was about indirect sources. I think we shouldn't wait on that. I think that we should actually, I think the district should actually start to investigate that and bring it to a discussion versus wait for us.
So, and I did commit to, so we've had the longest standing first in the nation indirect source review rule. And so I'm happy that it is a standing rule that's actually recently been amended to have a little bit more applicability. It is different than the South Coast rule. And so what I heard from Genevieve is that whether it's our next meeting, we can talk about this at an agenda setting, or a future sooner than later meeting, the district will come to you, update you on our existing rule as well as the South Coast rule, and sort of where that's at kind of in each of their processes. The South Coast rule is much newer, and to Genevieve's point is different than the district rule.
Okay, thank you everyone for engaging in that really important conversation and staying a little over time again. So we will wrap up the updates, and what we did not get to, I think maybe if Jess didn't sum it up in the beginning, we'll send via email. Lisa, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah. I remembered what I was going to say. It was about trees. And I threw the piece of paper out and I didn't keep it. This week I received a tree survey, and I'm like, we're doing a tree survey? The city's doing a tree survey? It was from the National Arbor Society asking me about trees in Fresno, and it was a fundraising thing. But I thought it was really interesting, the questions that they asked. So as we move along with trees, we might want to think about surveying some of the most impacted communities to see exactly what they want. Anyway, that's all I wanted to bring up. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for adding that. Ed, I see you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Lisa's comment about trees is interesting. I live in Modesto, and there is a massive amount of trees dying from drought. And actually, I believe it's almost to the point now where we ought to be able to begin to determine what the CO2 capture reduction is going to be by the trees that are dying because of drought and water issues. I'm really concerned because it's a two-edged sword for everyone, but I can tell you that I have a tree that's 4 foot in diameter in my front yard that was beautiful, and an arborist just told me it's going to be dead within 5 years based on its growth. So I'm no one's more supportive of tree vegetative barriers and tree planting, but we also need to look at the diminishing results of what's happening outside of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. That is definitely an important consideration. So if there are no other final comments, we can move to wrapping up this meeting. Let's see. So as we mentioned at the start of the meeting, we are here also to help develop transparency and accountability. And so to do that, we are going to take a moment to review the action items that were captured. And I will share my screen. And I see your question, Genevieve, that we'll get to that in a minute, but it's next Wednesday at 4:30. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Action items. Okay. So the first is to ideate on ways to celebrate our milestone of reaching our 50th CSC meeting. It's suggested to please join our agenda setting meeting that is next Wednesday at 4:30 to share any ideas. We also would like volunteers to support the air monitoring and outreach committee in reviewing materials. The Air District staff, Fresno Unified School District staff, and any interested CSE members met to discuss the air filtration program. And we have a note here if you would like to watch that meeting. We have a link to where you can see the recording. And as always, these action items are posted online, so you'll be able to click on that link. Next, the Air District will update the community on the status of Fresno Unified School District using air filtration SERP funds. As of the last meeting, Fresno Unified is committed to purchasing standalone units. Next, the Air District is to provide specificity on potential allocation of funds for infrastructure cost versus cost for buses for implementation of the SERP measure on school buses. That was a mouthful. Next, the Air District will review wildfire recommendations on flyers to ensure that they have the most up-to-date content. One suggestion was to specify the use of N95 masks. Next, the Air District is launching its Clean Air Room program, and they're actively searching for residents to participate. So if you are interested, contact the Air District as soon as you can to participate because there are a limited number of units that are available. Our last item here is the Air District will be scheduling a land use meeting to discuss city planning processes that impact the AB 617 South Fresno boundaries. And they'll reach out to the city and the county officials for confirmation on next steps and partnership strategies, like establishing MOUs within the city, developing a participatory process with community input. We're also looking for CSE members to volunteer to be a part of this meeting and the agenda setting. Are there any questions or modifications to any of these that I just read? Okay. And so before we wrap up, I'm going to share my screen one last time. Let's see. So here we have the dates for our next agenda setting meeting that we were just talking about, which again is next Wednesday, August 17th at 4:30 p.m. If you are not able to make it to that meeting, and we recognize not everyone can, we would still love to have you participate either by contacting anyone on the Air District or the facilitation team to share your thoughts with us, and then we can bring those forward. We also want to point out the date of our next CSE meeting. So our regular time is usually on the second Wednesday of the month, but for September, that conflicts with a TCC meeting. And so we are rescheduling our CSC meeting to the third Wednesday, which is September 21st. And it'll still be at our regular time, which is 5:30. And so I'll stop sharing my screen again. And now we'll move on to some closing remarks. So I want to invite both Jessica and Kimberly to wrap up the meeting for us.
I'll be brief. I want Kimberly to have the last word and just thank you all. There was just such great engagement and we have a lot of, I think, really big things to uplift and to think about and to move forward. So thank you.
Just want to say thank you to everyone. Really good, rich conversation tonight. A lot of things that were tasked with the Air District to come back to this commission or the steering committee to report. And I just want to also acknowledge that there was a little bit of a mix up with the agenda. I was actually supposed to be a little bit more involved, but it's okay. I will co-host again, hopefully, and be able to be just a little bit more involved. And it was no one's fault. It was just a little mix up on the agenda when it was time to transition from one item to another, but just wanted to acknowledge that. And glad to give you guys some time back with your family. Enjoy your evening and thank you for the conversation tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you
Gracias.
so much, Kimberly.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Night.